Your consciousness expands in every direction. It means there's no up and there's no down. It means there's no right and there's no wrong. It means that there's no north and there's no south. It means that there's no beginning and no end. You begin to move into a consciousness place within yourself that you'll find yourself, when you move into spirit, you're going to find yourself doing things that you don't understand why you're doing them. In 1994, when Immaculée was imprisoned in this tiny little bathroom with 7 other people with no facilities, she did something that I found so astounding. What she did when she entered that bathroom is she asked the pastor whose home she was in, "Do you have an English and a French dictionary?" And she learned English while she was being hunted to be killed. For what reason? Why would someone who is in that kind of a state practice, day in and day out, up to 8, 10 hours, and she couldn't speak. They didn't speak for 91 days. No sound whatsoever. So 5 years later, she is a survivor. She represents less than 0.5% of the Tutsi women of Rwanda who survived. All the rest were killed. She went into a place within herself and taught herself a language that she was going to need 5 years from now. That's what I mean by your consciousness expands in every direction. And then 5 years later, in 1999 or 2000, she had when she was here in America on an asylum visa, married, living out on Long Island, has 2 children, is assimilated into our culture, is a great spokesperson for transcending hatred on the planet. She woke every day, 3 o'clock in the morning, before she went to work at the UN, and wrote every little detail of what happened in those 91 days. 150,000 words she wrote and gave that to me 5 years after that. But how did she know in 1994 that she was going to be in America and coming up on a stage like this and talking to our country in a language that is her 3rd language? How did she know that? Your consciousness expands in every direction. When you have an inkling, when you have, like Ryan, when you have a feeling within you that this is something that you have to do, that you can't be stopped from doing it, the whole world changes. And you start and you listen to it. And you find yourself, if someone hands you a book, and then someone else talks about that book, and then someone else mentions it, and then you see the author on television, and all of a sudden you start saying, wait a minute, I've got to listen to this. I am being directed. I'm being called. I trust in this. I totally, completely trust. Your consciousness expands in every direction when you enter the world of spirit, and you get yourself pulled in these directions, and you allow yourself to be pulled in that way. That's what I mean by your consciousness expands in every direction. Nothing is impossible. And whatever you find yourself doing, that's what you allow yourself to do and what you allow yourself to be. There's a great quote by Rumi. He's just one of the greatest. Every tree and plant in the meadow seemed to be dancing. Those which average eyes would see as fixed and still. That's what happens when your consciousness expands in every direction. You see, you understand the Tao. The Tao is like it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. It's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. You're a sculptor and you sculpt yourself a vase. And what do you think makes the vase? What makes the vase is not the tile, and it's not the substance of the material. It's the inner space within there that is surrounding it. Without that inner space within, there can be no vase. And without that inner space within you, there's no you. You're not skin and bone and all that. You are. That encapsulates an inner silence, an inner place that is totally and completely yours, uniquely yours. Your consciousness expands in every direction. When you do, you start practicing things like kindness, where judgment was before. I've often said that when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, just pick kind. Why? Because it's more closely aligned with your spirit. You begin to exude something called love. You feel it for everyone. Believe it or not, at the end of Immaculate's book, she goes to the prison where the people who were her killers, one was her mathematics teacher. And what happens is that you begin to embrace a kind of love even for the people who would do such harm to you. And I'm telling you, that's what saved her. You'll see that when you read it. That's what saved her. The ability to go to that place within, that place of forgiveness. As Mark Twain said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Powerful thinking. You become an instrument of truth. You become someone who listens. You become someone who is God realized.
Becoming a spiritual being is synonymous with being a miracle worker and knowing the bliss of real magic. The differences between people who are non-spiritual or physical-only beings and those that I call spiritual beings are dramatic. I use the terms spiritual and non-spiritual in the sense that a spiritual being has a conscious awareness both of the physical and the invisible dimension, while the non-spiritual being is only aware of the physical domain. Here are 12 beliefs and practices for you to cultivate as you develop your abilities to manifest miracles in your life. Number 1. A spiritual being knows that there are other senses beyond the 5 physical senses. The non-spiritual being lives exclusively within the 5 senses, believing that if you cannot see, touch, smell, hear, or taste it, then it simply doesn't exist. As you work toward becoming a spiritual being as well as a physical being, you begin to live more and more consciously within the invisible realm. Hence, a whole new world opens up. Number 2. The non-spiritual being believes we are alone in the universe. The spiritual being knows he or she is never alone. A spiritual being is comfortable with the idea of having teachers, observers, and divine guidance available at any time. For the non-spiritual being, this is all hogwash. This is a physical-only universe to the non-spiritual being, and the goal is to manipulate and control the physical world in any way that we can. Spiritual beings know that they are not alone, and that they can use their own divine guidance to become miracle makers in their own lives. Number 3. The non-spiritual being is focused on external power. The spiritual being is focused on personal empowerment. External power is all located in the dominance of and control over the physical world. This is the power of war and military might, the power of laws and organization, the power of business and stock market games. By contrast, the spiritual being is focused on empowering himself and others to higher and higher levels of consciousness and achievement. It is true empowerment to know that one can live in the world with others who have different points of view and have no need to control or vanquish them as victims. Once you no longer need to dominate others, to acquire more stuff, or to control the environment around you, you will have shifted your focus from external power to personal empowerment. Number 4. The non-spiritual being feels separated and distinct from all others, a being unto himself. The spiritual being knows that he is connected to all others and lives his life as if each person he meets shares being human with him. When a person feels himself to be separate from all others, he becomes more self-centered and much less concerned about the problems of others. The spiritual being knows that we are all connected and is able to see the fullness of God in each person with whom he makes contact in his life. Being connected means that the need for conflict and confrontation is eliminated. Number 5. The non-spiritual being believes exclusively in a cause-effect interpretation of life. The spiritual being knows that there is a higher power working in the universe beyond mere cause and effect. The non-spiritual being lives exclusively in the world of the physical, where cause and effect rules. The spiritual being goes beyond Newton's physics and lives in an entirely different realm. The spiritual being knows that thoughts come out of nothingness, and that in our dream state, when we are in pure thought, cause and effect play no role whatsoever. Number 6. The non-spiritual being is motivated in life by achievement, performance, and acquisitions. The spiritual being is motivated by ethics, serenity, and quality of life. For the non-spiritual being, the focus is on learning for the purpose of high grades, getting ahead, and acquiring possessions. For the spiritual being, success is defined by aligning oneself with one's purpose. The spiritual being knows that living purposefully involves serving in a loving fashion. While the spiritual being will achieve and perform at high levels and even acquire many possessions, it is not the end-all principle that guides his life. Number 7. The non-spiritual being has no place for the practice of meditation. The spiritual being cannot imagine life without it. For the non-spiritual being, answers are sought by working hard, struggling, persevering, setting goals, and in competing in a dog-eat-dog world. The spiritual being knows the enormous power of the practices of meditation. He knows that meditation makes him more alert and able to think more clearly. For the non-spiritual being, this is perceived as an escape from reality. But for the spiritual being, it is an introduction to a whole new reality that includes an opening in your life that will lead you to miracle making. Number 8. For the non-spiritual being, the concept of intuition can be reduced to a bunch of haphazard thoughts. For the spiritual being, intuition is viewed as guidance, and this inner insight is never taken lightly or ignored. You know from your own experience that when you ignore your intuitive proddings, you end up being sorry or having a hard lesson show up in your life. To the non-spiritual person, intuition is often ignored or shunned in favor of behaving in habitual ways. The spiritual being strives to increase consciousness concerning their intuition. They pay attention to their invisible messages and know deep within that there is something working here that is much more than a coincidence. Number 9. The non-spiritual being hates evil and is determined to eradicate that which he believes to be evil. The spiritual being knows that everything that he hates and fights weakens him, and all that he is for empowers him. The non-spiritual being knows what he hates, and much of his energy, both mental and physical, is devoted to fighting what he perceives to be bad or evil. Spiritual beings do not order their lives to be against anything. They work for what they are for, rather than fighting what they are against. When you fight evil by employing the methods of hatred and violence, you yourself become a part of the hatred and violence of evil itself, despite the rightness of your position in your own mind. Real magic occurs in your life when you have eliminated the hatred that is in your life, even the hatred that you have against hatred. Number 10. The non-spiritual person feels no sense of responsibility to the universe. Therefore, he has not developed a reverence for life. The spiritual being has a reverence for life that goes to the essence of all beings. The spiritual being behaves as if the God in all life mattered, and he feels a sense of responsibility to the universe. Miracle-making capability comes out of a strong reverence for all life, including your own, and therefore, in order to know real magic, you must learn to think and act in ways consistent with being a reverent spiritual being. Number 11. The non-spiritual being finds himself laden down with grudges, hostility, and the need for revenge. The spiritual being has no room in his heart for such impediments to miracle-making and real magic. The spiritual being knows that all spiritual masters have talked about the importance of forgiveness. Forgiveness is an act of the heart. If you fill your inner invisible self with bitterness and revenge toward others, you'll leave no room for the harmony and love that are necessary in order for you to experience real magic in your life. And finally, number 12. The non-spiritual being knows that there are real-world limitations, and that while there may be some evidence that miracles exist, they are viewed as random happenings for a few fortunate others. The spiritual being believes in miracles and his own unique ability to receive loving guidance and to experience a world of real magic. The following 4 examples aren't rules or laws that apply to everyone, but if they do work for others, I'll be even more inspired because it's my intention to be in a space where I'm able to give to others all that I know. I also offer these ideas with a constant reminder that when one listens to Spirit, all things are possible. And even though I'm offering them in a numbered sequence, they certainly don't conform to any linear arrangement. 1. Alignment of feelings. When I feel good, or God, I'm aligned with Spirit. As I tell my children, we must rely on how we feel to determine our state of health, rather than seeking our answers in a medical printout full of numbers. Feeling energized, content, excited, and happy are better indicators of our health and well-being than having our bodily functions assessed by a distant laboratory. A positive, honest response to the question, does this or will this make me feel good, tells us immediately if we're aligned with our creative source or not. 2. Alignments with nature. Everything in nature is in spirit. It isn't spoiled by ego, nor can it ever be. So when nature speaks to us, we should listen intently. When a wild bird touches us, for instance, or a fish brushes by when we're swimming in the ocean or a lake, I believe that it's a direct communication from our source of being. Since these creations of God instinctively keep their distance, when they depart from their DNA patterns to actually contact us physically, I think we should pay attention. So be aware of episodes in nature that arouse spirit and kindle an inner spark of awe and admiration for you. You don't have to discuss it with another being. If it has meaning for you, it's valid. Listen to the winds, the critters, the clouds, the rains, and the oceans. Listen to it all. Indeed, nature has much to teach us, and it will help show the way. All we need to do is align with its perfection and note how it aligns with ours. 3. Alignment with events. Strange occurrences and seemingly inexplicable events may actually be our all-creating source lining up coincidences, in quotes, to teach us and show us the way. The reason we begin to notice all this type of aligned synchronicity is because we've tuned into it. The teachers have always been there, but now we notice them. And our noticing indicates a new level of readiness to listen to our ultimate calling. In fact, these alignments can take some really interesting forms. The same numbers showing up, for example. We awake precisely at 4:44 morning after morning and then see those numbers appear on the odometer, on the radio, as a checkbook balance, at the deli counter, and as an assigned number for a charity walk, causes us to ask, what's going on here? The answer is that the universe is using us to be receptive and pay attention. It's not about playing all fours in a casino or the lottery. It's about knowing that these seemingly accidental repetitions are actually invitations from Spirit to join it. When a book literally falls into our lap or is sent to us by several different people, or even when we keep seeing the title and having it referred to us by others over and over, we need to notice, stop our resistance, and surrender. When we end up reading the contents and applying what it offers, we're aligning ourselves and becoming a vibrational match to the same source that's sending us these signals. And 4, alignments with people. When people line up with our thoughts and mysteriously connect their physical presence with our private inner meanderings, we should take note. We must tell ourselves, Spirit is aligning my thoughts with events that are happening. I'll stay alert to what I'm being offered here because there may be a reason. That's all. Just be cognizant of what might be happening, and by being open to what may be baffling and perhaps indecipherable, we're likely to discover that we're being guided to learn. A few weeks ago, I was reading through a book I'd written 16 years ago. In it, I mentioned a friend, Erlene Rintz, whom I'd attended school with from 4th grade through high school. I put the book down and went jogging, yet Erlene was still on my mind. I thought, I'm going to call her the next time I'm in Detroit. After all, we're both having our 65th birthdays this year. That very evening, I was scheduled to receive the Martin Luther King Mahatma Gandhi Peace Award from the Unity Church of Maui, which would be attended by approximately 1,000 people. As I completed my speech and walked to the lobby to sign autographs, I saw the little girl who sat next to me in grade school and who was my first love and who occupied my thoughts throughout my school years. Believe it or not, as I was thinking of her more than a half-century later, Erlene was thousands of miles from home and hugging me in the lobby of a theater in Lahaina, Maui. It turns out that she was visiting Maui, had seen the award announcement in the newspaper, and had come to the auditorium to surprise me. It was one of those synchronistic alignments of spirit at work. Somehow, at an unconscious level, I was already reconnecting to Erlene without being aware that she was even in the area. Noticing the same folks showing up in different settings, running into people we haven't seen in a while after we've just heard their names mentioned, and repeatedly seeing an individual's name in magazines, on television, or in a local bookstore, are all synchronistic alignments. Spirit is lining up these sequential happenings for a reason. We just need to be open to learning the reason, and it most likely will be revealed. Perhaps it will be a dream or a sudden instant of eureka, or maybe it will become clearer when simply allowed. No matter how the message comes, we'll look back on it with a renewed insight and the benefit of no longer being closed-minded about such possibilities. What I know for certain within my very core is that there's no separation between us and all that we encounter in the universe.
Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. Be in a state of bewilderment. That's what I mean by being spiritual. One of the ways to test whether you're on the path that I'm speaking about, the path of being into a spiritual being, having a human experience rather than the other way around, is to detect in yourself how much of my energy and my time do I spend being in a state of cheerfulness. How cheerful am I? Or how morose am I? How down am I? How, when I'm coming home to my family and to those that I love, how am I anticipating what it's going to be like when I go into the house? Am I down more? Am I unhappy more? Am I looking at the pessimistic side of life? Am I always feeling that something might be wrong? Am I putting my attention on what I don't want? Because if your thoughts are on what you don't want, and what you think about is what expands, what you don't want is what you'll continue to see showing up in your life. You'll keep purchasing it. Another element of what we call spiritual in these three words in this program is the sense or the extent to which you feel connected to other people. You see, the ego is the part of us that believes that we're separate from each other. I'm separate from you, you're separate from me. You have a different body than I do. I'm separate from what I would like to attract into my life, and I am separate from God. When you move into a spiritual approach to life, you begin to see yourself as connected to everyone and everything. And competition is replaced by something called cooperation. And when you see another human being in pain or struggling, you know that a part of you is in pain and struggling. And you begin to reach out rather than looking within and saying, how does this affect just me? It's almost as if you have to make a shift. And there's a wonderful story, and I'd like to share this story with you. It's a story, this is a story that took place at the Special Olympics in Seattle. And it's a true story. And when I read it, it really grabbed me. And I thought, when I do this program, I would like to share this with the rest of the world. A few years ago, at the Seattle Special Olympics, 9 contestants, all physically or mentally disabled, assembled at the starting line for the 100-yard dash. At the gun, they all started out, not exactly in a dash, but with a relish to run the race, to finish, and to win. All that is except one little boy who stumbled on the asphalt and tumbled over a couple of times, and he began to cry. The other 8 heard the little boy crying. They slowed down and looked back. Then they all turned around and went back, and every single one of them. And one little girl with Down syndrome bent down and kissed him and said, "This will make it better." Then all 9 linked arms and walked together to the finish line. Everyone in the stadium stood, and the cheering went on for several minutes. Isn't that a beautiful story? It's the kind of thing that I refer to when I use this word spiritual. A sense of an awareness that it isn't about being better than somebody else. I think true nobility is not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than you used to be. And I know this about myself, that if any one of you watching this show, or any of you here in this audience were giving this talk, I could be sitting in that audience, and I would have just as much to learn from what you had to say to me as you have to learn from what I may be saying to you. The thing that I know for certain today is that I'm just better than I used to be. As a man, as a father, as a writer, as a speaker, I know that I'm better than I used to be. And I try to make that something that I do each and every day. Just a little bit better than I used to be. To me, that's what I mean when I use the concept of spirituality.